Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, May 18th. Welcome to the Montgomery County Council. We are going to continue our work on the FY24 operating budget and the FY24 to 28 CIP, but first we're going to move into our Legislative Day 17. And first is the introduction of bills. The first bill that will be introduced is Expedited Bill 2523, Taxation, Development Impact Taxes for Transportation and Public School Improvement Amendments. The lead sponsors are Vice President Friedson, myself, and Councilmember Stewart. A public hearing is scheduled for June 13th at 1:30 p.m. and a Government Operations Committee work session is scheduled for June 15th. Ms. McCartney-Green.
I think that summarizes the introduction, but the purpose of the bill, and I'm sure Council Vice President Friedson will also explain, is to modify the calculation of the tax rate adjustments for the transportation improvements by requiring a cumulative increase or decrease in the construction costs rather than an annual average every 2 years. It also will set a cap on the development impact tax rate for school and transportation improvements. It will also allow certain carryover increases of the biennial tax rates and generally amend the law governing transportation and school development impact taxes. In addition to that, Council President, there is an accompanying resolution, draft resolution that's provided in the packet. If the Council does proceed with this bill and changing the rates, the resolution does have the proposed new rates there as well.
Very good. Thank you very much, Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Both of you did a great job. I don't really need to add much. I think the GO chair might want to chime in here as well. But you know, the purpose here is to smooth out some of the huge fluctuations that are occurring on the school's calculation and to bank it so that we capture the revenue in the end, but that it be spread out not among residents and developments, but between developments that happen at different times, and to smooth out that aspect so we don't have these shocks to the system, and to clean up what was a drafting error, I believe, was not the intent of the council, to essentially average out, which halves the transportation impact tax incidentally, and has had an unintended consequence that was noted. So appreciate Dr. Orland for raising this issue and some of these challenges. Appreciate working with colleagues to try to address them. I think this is a way that helps to smooth out the issues, make sure that we are ultimately capturing revenue. And I will just note that based on the recordation tax decisions and discussions, this does not have an impact on any specific projects in the current CIP under consideration. There's a nominal amount of annual money that is impacted, and that will be reflected in the set aside, which is essentially the contingency on an annual basis. So no impact on specific school projects or other CIP projects, affixed to the transportation side, and a way to smooth out and address the school side while banking it so that we ultimately capture the revenue down the road. So with that, I'll yield back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Stewart.
Great. I'll just add my thanks to Council Vice President Friedson for that, and just say that, you know, when I first heard about this issue, when it was raised by the staff, it kind of sounded a bit familiar of the conversations that we're having regarding inflation and the possibility of looking at a recession moving forward. And I was concerned about where the impact fees were going, because it runs counter to what I believe our role is here, is to help create stability and predictability. And that includes for people who are coming to our community and wanting to develop. As we've talked about, you know, it also includes our homeowners and our renters. And so this is a big part of, I think, what our role is. And in meeting with many of our building and development community, you know, I've heard from them about the cost and uncertainty. And while we have this housing crisis and we're talking about needing to make sure we have as many projects coming online, I think this legislation will help builders plan. And I'm hoping as we continue to have conversations in June when we are done with the budget and look at things like rent stabilization and other things, that we are looking at how we can build on being predictable and stable, and having that as the environment for people who want to live here as well as people who want to build here. So I thank my colleagues for introducing this and look forward to the continued conversation.
Thank you. I'll just add my appreciation to Dr. Orland for raising this issue, and to my colleagues, Vice President Friedson and Councilmember Stewart, for working together on this. And I think Councilmember Stewart used the exact right words. This is about stability and predictability. If we want to build more housing in Montgomery County, because the only way we can have more housing that is affordable is if we have more housing, we need our housing builders to have predictable fee schedules. That's really what this is all about. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. I also want to thank Dr. Erlin for bringing this up and making sure that to the sponsors, co-sponsors, to make sure that it happens in a timely manner. So thank you for doing that. I would like to add myself as a co-sponsor to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, this legislation is introduced. Thank you. Next is the introduction of a resolution to amend the development impact tax rates for transportation and public school improvements. A public hearing is scheduled for June 13th at 1:30 p.m. Ms. McCartney, Green?
No further comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just for understanding of colleagues, the resolution is to actually implement in the first year the changes that the bill would ultimately make permanently and in perpetuity moving forward, because of the resolution requirements to record in the register in May were past the point of the publishing of in the register. And so this is there's a question of whether the bill would supersede the resolution that's already in effect, and this is essentially belts and suspenders.
Thank you. And with that, that's been introduced. Colleagues, we're now going to move on to items related to the FY24 operating budget and the CIP. And before we begin today's conversation, we are going to get an overview on the FY24 revenues and expenditures. Conversation with Ms. Michelson and Mr. Howard.
So the purpose of this item is to summarize where you were as of the end of the day on Friday. And I know you're about to make changes to that, but to make sure that our public is fully aware of each step in the process, this simply catalogs all the changes that the council made to the reconciliation list during your review and summarizes the reductions, what you placed on high priority and what you placed on low priority. And since you're about to move beyond that, I'm going to stop there and see if you have any questions.
I'll start. So this morning we are going to be talking about tax rates, and we're going to be talking about the overall budget. So can you provide us with some top line figures as where the budget is right now as introduced? Or as to be introduced?
So I'm not sure I'm following your question. The county executive sent over a budget that required a 10% property tax increase. The council's been working very diligently to bring that down. As you can see, through Friday, you had identified 49.2 million in reductions.
That was my
and
question.
$7.7 million in additional resources, and you had placed 294.4 million on the reconciliation list to consider as to whether you wanted to include funding.
And so according to the information you just provide and the budget as it's been amended and the reconciliation list as it will be proposed later today, all of which is online for everybody to see right now, what would a corresponding tax rate be required to support all of that?
If the reconciliation list is supported as before you, it would be a 4.7% tax increase.
And just so I understand it, that tax rate is to support the budget that will be proposed, that has gone through committee of the whole, and will be presented later today.
Yes, and I just want to emphasize that the tax increase is to support the Montgomery County Public Schools. So that is the tax rate is associated with some of your additions for schools.
And then one other question that I welcome colleagues to ask if they have any questions as well. When we started this process, we recognized that the county government had between 1,200 and 1,500 vacancies on any given day. And this council, all of us here, worked extremely hard throughout the budget process to look at those vacancies and determine if they could be repurposed or if the funds that were allocated to them could be reused. On top of that, the county executive proposed hundreds of new positions in this budget as well. Where are we through this budget process with relation to the new positions that had been proposed?
So the reconciliation list that is proposed reduces the number of new positions by approximately 35%. And in addition, I will note the council did support additional laps as well. That doesn't reduce the number of positions, but it reduces funding associated with vacant positions.
Okay, colleagues? Not seeing any comments or questions. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Good morning. Just so we're clear, the packet that you're working off of is the packet. Which packet are you working off? Let me ask that.
Well, we were presenting number 1, and the council president has asked some questions that led us to jump into some of the materials that are in item number 9, I believe it is.
9, okay. Which is the reconciliation list, yeah.
Yes.
And we didn't talk about packet 2, which I'm going to ask about, which is Mr. Howard.
That's the next item to go into.
Okay, well, we're jumping around, so I just feel like for the public's benefit, Ms. Michelson talked about a 4.7% increase based on the reconciliation list. That is item 9, correct? However, in 2, we're talking about just what was, the last time the public heard anything from us was there was a list of high priority and priority items that were put on the list. And in packet 2, it's discussed, if you could, what the property tax increase would have to be to fund the items on both the priority list and the high priority, or just the high priority. Could you just talk about that?
So to fund the items that the council placed on the high priority and priority list would require an 8.2 cent tax increase, so lower than the executive by 1.8 cents, but because of the reductions the council has already taken. If the council wanted to fund only the high priority items on the reconciliation list, it would require a tax increase of 5.7 cents.
And that would include MCPS 7 tranches as identified by high priority.
Correct.
Okay. So I just want everyone to understand that that was what happened last time we were on TV, and now what will be discussed later were things that we're going to have a further discussion about, but that did not happen on TV. But I think the highlight point for me is under any scenario, which is good news for taxpayers and I think the county, even if we funded everything that the committees put on priority and high priority, it would still be almost a 2-cent reduction of the county executive's proposed 10% increase. And if we just funded high priority, it would be almost a 5-cent reduction, or 4 cent and change, 4.7, I think. So just something so people are aware. We do have choices here, and so I'll have more to say about that later, but I appreciate you highlighting that since we talked about it. Thank you.
Very good. So you've set the stage. Thank you. And now we'll move on to item number 2, which is I'm sorry, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just to be clear, on the 4.7 rate, the 7 tranches for Montgomery County Public Schools is included in that as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
Vice President Friedson.
I just want to make sure I understand, because one tranche is 1%. And so to go from 4.7 to 5.7 would cover the totality of 1%. So it can't possibly cover additionally high priority items on the rec list that don't make it in. So unless 4.7 covers all of high priority, there's no more space. So can you just clarify that? Because I'm missing something here, and I think that's what you're hearing from colleagues. I just think it's important to understand that point. If 4.7 is to cover a portion of high priority, then 1%, 22.3 million would go to MCPS for a full another tranche. If you're only taking a partial tranche and then a portion of something off the reconciliation list, then you could cover it, but I'm just not sure I'm understanding the math.
So right now, the council determined that high priority only included the 7 tranches. So when Mr. Howard was talking about funding the rest of the high priority list, it would still be the same 7 tranches. So the additional things that would be funded would not be MCPS related.
Yes, I think that was not what it sounded like, and so I just want to make sure that was clear. High priority would include 7 tranches for MCPS plus all of the high priority lists, and that gets to, you're saying, close to 4.7%. 5.7%. If you were to include more of the MCPS tranches that weren't on the high priority list, it would go above 5.7%. Yeah, thank you. I don't think that's how it sounded previously, so I just wanted to make sure that was clarified. I'll yield back to you, Mr. President.
So thank you for that status update, and let's turn right now to a work session on property tax options, the amount rate, and the income tax offset credit.
Okay, so thank you very much, and we have 2 items that the council will take straw votes on today. The first is the amount of the income tax offset credit value, or ITOC value, for FY24, and the second is the weighted average real property tax rate for FY24, which we've already initiated the discussion on. So I'm just going to walk through each of these items, but with a little bit of background. For FY24, as the council is aware, the county executive does recommend retaining the ITOC at $692 and increasing the weighted property tax rate by 10 cents. Which would take it to 1.0785 per $100 in assessed value. It's important to note that Section 305 of the county charter does require an affirmative vote from all council members to approve a weighted property tax rate that exceeds the weighted tax rate for the current year. However, under state law, counties can exceed the charter limits on property tax rates or revenues solely to fund their local school boards by a simple majority vote. And the county executive's recommendation does designate that the increased tax revenue to Montgomery County Public Schools. So turning to the FY24 ITOC value, the ITOC provides a tax credit to owner-occupied properties in the county. The credit is a flat rate, and it does provide a small degree of progressivity in the property tax system, since lower valued properties will experience a greater reduction in taxes compared to higher valued properties. The executive recommends an ITOC of $692 in FY24, which is the same ITOC that the county has had since FY11. The Table 1 on page 2 of the staff report shows just illustrative examples of what changes in the ITOC mean in terms of property tax revenues. And so, for example, if the council wanted to reduce the ITOC, it would have more revenue. If the council increased the ITOC, it would have less revenue. And so the council's decision today is to determine whether it supports the executive's recommended ITOC level of $692 for FY24. And I'll turn it back for questions or comments on that issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Great. I'd like to move to adopt the county executive's recommendation of $692 for the ITOC for this budget. Thank you.
Second.
So that has been moved by Councilmember Stewart, seconded by Vice President Friedson. Any comments? Not seeing those. All those in favor of the ITOC amount just moved? And that is unanimous.
Okay, so our next item is the weighted tax rate. And luckily, the consideration of the weighted tax rate has been simplified in the past couple of years, starting in FY22, whereas previously we had to work towards the total amount of revenue that would be achieved based on inflation and then calculate the tax rate backwards from that. It's now the council's decision, and the executive decision is simply what is the weighted average tax rate you would like to propose. So much simpler in terms of what we have to look at and what you need to consider. The executive's recommended weighted tax rate is 1.0785 per $100 of assessed value, as I mentioned, which is an increase of 10 cents or 10% over the FY23 weighted tax rate of 0.9785 per 100 in assessed value. On table 2, on page 3 of the staff report, we show a variation of how much revenue is generated from the executive's proposed 10-cent tax increase, what the total amount is and what the additional delta is from the tax increase, and then correspondingly what the different revenue amounts would be for every 1 cent increment. As the council, certainly's decision is to whether you want to support the executive's recommendation or any value in between. So you can kind of get a sense of what the different revenue changes are at different tax rate increases. As we started talking about earlier, the council has placed $294.4 million in expenditures on the reconciliation list. And absent any other changes, the $51.7 million in reductions you have made to date would mean that you could reduce the property tax rate from what was proposed by the executive. So we include some information in the staff report, which was discussed earlier, noting that the tax rate could be reduced by 1.8 cents to fund all the high priority and priority items, or it could be reduced by 4.3 cents to fund only the high priority items on the reconciliation list. And again, those are just to provide a sense of what the impact is from different decisions you have made and you have before you. We also included in the staff report the potential impact of property tax increase on homeowners and commercial properties. For the information on homeowners was also provided to you as part of your budget overview. And the important note there is that in addition to a property tax increase, homeowners are also experiencing increases in assessed value. And so that's going to impact their tax bill in addition to the increase. So what a homeowner might see on their tax bill would be potentially more than whatever tax rate the council approves because of the increase in assessed values. So the table on table 3 on page 4 just provides a range of what that could look like, and that is based on the executive's recommendation. The Department of Finance also provided some additional information of the potential impact on commercial properties, and that's table 4, which is on page 5, broken down by commercial condominium, industrial, and apartments. And again, the column at the far right shows, based on the executive's proposed 10-cent tax increase, what the projected impact might be on an average property. And so with that, I'll turn it back to the council to discuss and determine what the weighted average property tax rate you would like to support for FY24.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, let me thank the staff and you for getting us to this point. This has certainly not been easy, but I would like to move that the council increase the FY24 weighted average property tax rate by 4.7 cents to 1.0255 per $100 in assessed value, with the revenue generated from this increase dedicated to Montgomery County Public Schools. Thank you.
A second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Councilmember Stewart.
Actually, I didn't think I was going to be the first one up. Thank you. So thank you, Councilmember Katz and Councilmember Natalie Fanny Gonzalez for moving this forward today. And I do want to thank the staff. There's been a lot of work that has gone into this, and I very much appreciate all the efforts by staff and my colleagues. I'm going to say that today I do have a lot of mixed emotions. I am proud of the work that we have engaged in as a council, especially through the committee process on this budget. But I will express my concerns about the end of this process and how we ended up with this tax rate. I feel to achieve the proposed tax rate that we have before us right now, we are using one-time resources to reduce the tax rate and creating fiscal challenges for our future. Decisions were made through our process that some items that we are going to have to pay for in the future will need to come out of our reserves. As the chair of the Government Operations Committee, I have spoken publicly and repeatedly about my concerns about this budget and about the use of one-time funds and reserves for continuing programs and operations that I believe should either be tax supported or funded through reliable funding streams. While we did make some adjustments, and I will speak to that later when we speak to the whole budget, the decisions that we have made related to the tax rate leave me very concerned, particularly as many of us have talked about, we may be headed into a recession in our country. So I think we are in a tough position, and again, I very much respect my colleagues and thank you for the work that you all have done and your interest in lowering the tax rate. I have agreed and stated that when we got this budget from the county executive, that what was proposed at that time from him was too much, and I'm probably not too far away from where my colleagues are now. But I believe that pushing to the lower tax rate by dipping into our reserves that otherwise I feel really should just be used for emergency spending is creating fiscal challenges for us in the future. And the bottom line for me is I don't see it as sustainable. So today, after much contemplation, I will be voting against the proposed tax rate. I do look forward to working with my colleagues and pledge to the residents of Montgomery County that I will continue to work for you and our county government and look for sound fiscal solutions in the future. I yield back my time.
Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, and thank you, GO Chair Stewart, for your comments and for your work, and all colleagues, and thanks to staff. I share your concerns on the use of reserves to what I would say is kind of artificially lower the tax rate this year. I'm going to speak from the perspective of as chair of the Education Committee, in that the school system, whose job is to send us their budget to the county executive, and then he sends his budget, and then we deal with it, and they decide how to spend the money, has done so at a time of great need. And this budget, this tax rate proposed, and it's obviously directly connected to MCPS because all of the tax-supported funds will go to MCPS of the increased tax rate. And Mr. Howard, just so we're clear, because my buddy here, Councilmember Katz, framed it in the more traditional way, could you talk about what the percent increase is of what was just proposed, of what we're talking about? Is it the 4.7?
Yeah, 4.7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
all right.
4.7.
You said the 100 thing. You did the yeah, okay. All right. There we go. All right, he did both. I didn't hear it. Okay. Thank you. So it's 4.7. And as we just discussed, MCPS tranches are equivalent to a 1% increase. We got a letter yesterday from the superintendent and the board that said a couple of really important things. That if we are funding them at 7 increments, which this increase proposes to do, they would still have a gap of nearly $90 million, $89 million, to cover the $8 million that was cut out of the request from the executive, the $22.3 million that we took out in the Education and Culture Committee, and the blueprint costs and inflationary costs that they have. And they say that in order to do this, they're going to have to move $15 million from the operating budget to the ESSER grant, which, as the conversation was just mentioned, is going to run out. That money runs out and is already allocated. That they will have to reduce between 6 and 8 million the base budget. They would also have to do additional lapse and turnover, and that to achieve the rest of the savings, they're going to either need to increase class size between 0.5 and 2 students across grade level, or renegotiate agreed upon compensation packages, which include not just the salaries, but things that teachers need, like when they do tutoring, or what the rates are they're paid to help our students after school in the like. They say we could avoid most of this, but still have to do a lot of it, if we added a half tranche, which would be basically 11 million to what is currently designated by priority. And in this case would be a 5.2% tax increase. Now, it took us a while to get here. We all wanted to cut the fat and say, what's the lowest you could go? We're here. And I don't think, as a parent of MCPS kids, I don't want class size going up. 0.5 to 2 students per classroom in classes that are already stressed, for teachers who are already stressed. I don't want them not getting an increase for tutoring after school. I think it'd be well worth the additional 0.5 on the tax rate. I won't make a motion because I don't think there's a second. But I will say it's regrettable that we are not only doing in our budget what the GO chair said, moving things to the reserves and kicking the can down the road. It's also going to be a problem next year because the ESSER funds will run out. And whatever emergency measures the school system takes to use that fund to backfill some of this, which will still result in deep cuts, are going to be back before us next year. And that's not where we should be. It's not good for our students. It's not good for our budget. And for those reasons, I will be voting against the tax rate as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, President Glass. I would like to thank our council staff and Council President Glass for leading us through a challenging budget season. We faced many tough decisions on the county's budget, but I found the organization of this entire process to be extremely helpful. We have deliberated this budget for weeks, and I'm glad that each item was discussed in depth on each of the different committees and on the council floor last week. I remember it well. I barely got any sleep preparing and deliberating those packages, line by line. In a budget as large as ours, it is beneficial to all of us when we analyze each item with as much detail as possible. And I'm glad we also did it again after those discussions and after last week's engagement with our residents and with our colleagues. We did that between last Friday and between today. And a 4.7% property tax increase has been recommended. The same work that our taxpayers and the public asks of us as our elected officials to deliberate and carefully decide on imposing a tax are the same tough decisions that we're asking every department and every entity that we fund to do those same inward discussions and look within the resources you have and prioritize the items. We did that. With that being said, I believe that a property tax around 5% or a bit below is a reasonable amount that will help support our county's biggest needs. While I certainly wish we could fund more priority items, it is important that we consider the impact that property taxes will have on our economy and living affordability in our county, particularly with elderly and vulnerable residents. I appreciate the dialogue up to this point. I want to thank our community again for being so actively engaged. This is democracy in action. We will be improving the reconciliation list this afternoon, but I am open to other thoughts and perspectives from my colleagues that will be shared on this deeply important matter. It is clear to me that we need a balanced budget, a balanced approach that takes into account our highest priorities in the budget while also ensuring that we are not inordinately burdening our residents. I yield.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
So this is probably the most unsettled I have felt through any budget process in the last 17 years. Well, actually since the recession, that was way worse. And because there are a lot of external, internal factors that, particularly the external, that are beyond our control, but the internal is within our control. And every year during this time, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, we know you have difficult decisions to make, but I'd probably have enough money to buy the Jeep Wrangler I've always wanted. But there are so many needs spread out throughout our county in so many different areas, and the need for us to also focus on and continue to bear in mind that any decision that we make with the tax increase can't be looked at in isolation. And I made similar comments when we passed the recordation tax a couple of weeks ago. Our county residents have been hit from every possible angle, especially these last 4 years. And all of us very much recognize the need that we are seeing in our classrooms, in our communities, and across the entire county. And we're doing our best to balance those needs. And in a moment later this morning, we're going to be passing the reconciliation list. The sad reality is we will never be able to afford as a county government to address all the needs that exist within our communities. But as Councilmember Sales has said, we do expect and have worked with all of our respective county agencies through the committee process, as we do every year, in collaboratively trying to work through this budget process in a way that addresses their needs but balances out the need for us to face the fiscal realities before us. And there are many people who have chimed in that said any property tax increase will be devastating to our economy, will further hurt people who are on fixed incomes, and will further make it even less affordable to live here in Montgomery County. But that has to be balanced with the needs that we have had and see before us. And so I will support a 4.7% property tax increase because I think it addresses, to the degree to which is reasonable, the items that were presented by the county executive that are above and beyond the FY23 operating budget, but also bearing in mind, as we've all said many times, that we are going to be back here again next year. And so I will make expanded comments on what I think needs to happen to improve the internal process so that we're not in the same place logistically as we have been this time. But I do reluctantly support the 4.7% increase because I think it's necessary to address the needs that we have before us today. I understand there are many that feel that it needs to be higher than that. I get that. But I think this is as best a balanced approach as we're going to get through this year. So with that, I yield back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to colleagues for your thoughtful comments. I want to acknowledge the challenges that the county executive's recommended 10% property tax increase created for this council and the false premise that was established by invoking a never before used provision of state law which bypasses the unanimous vote requirement of the county charter. This property tax increase is not required to fund schools at the historic level we're prepared to approve today, or to fund teacher pay raises, both of which I support. I truly appreciate colleagues for the diligent work over the past 2 months, combing through this budget and bringing up and raising and addressing very important issues. The nearly 5% rate under consideration today is far better than what the county executive proposed. However, with rising assessments, cost pressures on residents and families, and looming economic uncertainties, I have deep concerns with the property tax increase, especially of this size at this time. We did have choices. We could live within our means of a more than $6.5 billion budget. We could have prioritized the people providing public services and educating our kids without adding new positions or new programs. We simply can't do everything all at once. Other jurisdictions around us have found ways to fund public education and support public employees without raising taxes. I know that we could have too. I recognize the challenging decision that colleagues are faced with today and have been faced with over the past 2 months, but I do believe we had other options, admittedly difficult ones, that could have avoided this property tax increase. For that reason, respectfully, I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Howard, I have a few questions. I started today's session asking questions about where we are and where we've come from to help understand where we're going. Could you help me in my recollection as we've been working through this budget process in the most open and transparent manner, discussing everything in committee and then everything at the high priority level, discussing it again at full council, which had never been done before. So we've had these conversations twice very publicly. Were all those votes on the agencies and the departments unanimous, to the best of your recollection?
I would have to go back and look. I don't recall off the top
I
of my
believe
head.
the answer is yes.
I think you're probably right, but
The answer is yes. And so if we are to move forward with the unanimous votes that we've taken to support our labor contracts, to express our full support for MCPS contracts and provide at least 7 of the 9 tranches, and to provide support across the board where we can, if those are our true intentions, what is the tax rate we would need to meet that obligation?
to meet the obligation with including the MCPS and the contracts for the county government, as well as the other priorities that the council has identified as part of item number 9 that would require the 4.7% tax increase.
So the unanimous votes that this council has taken would require a tax increase of 4.7%.
Assuming you want to fund all the items on.
Assuming we'd want to fund the
item
things
9.
we said we wanted to fund. Very important phrase. For those reasons, I will support this increase, recognizing that when we started this conversation, there were very diverse opinions on this 11-member body. Some starting with a position of full support for the county executive, some expressing full opposition to the county executive. But none of that matters because of the conversations we've had here in full public, because of the budget that is on the agenda, the reconciliation list that is publicly on the agenda. I support all of those things. Do I support more? Yes. But this is where we've landed, because it not only takes 6 people to support a tax increase according to state law, but it takes 8 people to spend the money. This is not a simple majority vote. This is trying to get to 8 in a very diverse 11-member body. And I want everyone in the public to understand that. And so is this everything everybody wants? It's not. But I have said what is important. I voted for all of these items, and the moral obligation is to fund them. And for that reason, I'm going to support this increase. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you, Council President. I agree with the concerns that we've heard expressed by some of my colleagues that this rate is not sufficient to fund what I believe is the appropriate level of funding for MCPS and for other items that the Council publicly and thoughtfully identified last week as high priority budget line items. I believe that residents understand that taxes are necessary to sustain high quality public services. Taxes are also necessary to balance revenue and expenditures. And by asking MCPS to spend one-time funds on ongoing expenses, by being unwilling to tax commensurate with our spending, we are helping worsen the conditions for a very bad budget situation next year. There has been a lot of conversation about the MCPS budget, as there should be. It's a big number because it's a big system and it's more heavily impacted now than ever. And I say that as a former MCPS teacher myself. For perspective, in this budget, the county contribution to MCPS is growing by roughly 8.5% over last year, which is substantial. But many county department budgets are growing by more than 10%. As with nearly everyone that came before us, MCPS came in with an aspirational request and eventually let us know what is truly the minimum needed. And in their case, that means the minimum to fund employee contracts, prevent class sizes from increasing as enrollment grows, and provide adequate service to our students in a time of deep need. And this body has decided not to meet that minimum. And it's a gamble. It's a gamble. And I don't think it's the right gamble. We have all noted that with this funding level, MCPS will technically have the funds in the bank to pay for the employee contracts, and they must do that. That must be priority number one. The problem is MCPS has never said we will not have the money in the bank to cover contracts. What they're saying is they can't fund the contracts without sacrificing class sizes or making other cuts that will significantly impact the classroom. That's what they're saying. We have record numbers of students living in poverty, receiving special education services, learning English as an additional language. Enrollment is now growing at 2,000 students per year. We are bleeding staff. And we're relying on MCPS not only to educate our children, but as a critical part of our healthcare delivery system, of our workforce development plans, as a touch point for families struggling with food insecurity and other critical issues. What we do not want is students next year having it worse than students this year. And I think that is a very real potential outcome here. I think it would be reasonable and right to ask residents to pay a little more than the proposed property tax rate on the table right now in order to fund more of the NCPS request and other obligations that we have agreed to in public. And I think most residents would have supported that. For that reason, I cannot vote for this tax rate.
Thank you. There is a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All those against? The motion passes 7-4. Thank you, Mr. Howard. Next, we are going to move into a work session and action on a resolution to approve the FY24 transportation fees, charges, and fares. Mr. Orlin. I will just say that this is an incredibly important part of our budget, making sure that people have the ability to travel around our region, get to work, get to school, and just conduct their daily quality of lives. And so this resolution encaptures all the important parts of our public transportation system. It will keep our ride-on fares at $1. It will continue to allow our kids under 18 to ride for free. And it also includes aspects of the parking lot districts, which we've pledged to revisit later this year, or at least before the next budget, so that we can improve a system that was created a few decades ago. Dr. Orlin, can you fill us in on what I left out?
You covered most of it. The only significant change the executive recommended, which the T&E committee also recommended, excuse me, is to extend the hours of charging in Silver Spring and Bethesda to Saturdays. Other than that, there are really no changes of significance to transit fares or to other aspects of the program. There are a couple of other new passes in the parking districts, but the main change is extending the hours in Silver Spring, Bethesda to Saturdays.
Very good. Colleagues, there is a T&E committee recommendation for approval, so all those in support of this resolution to approve the FY24 transportation fees, charges, and fares, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you, Dr. Orlin. Next is a work session and action on a resolution to establish the FY24 solid waste service charges. These are the fees that help support our solid waste management operations in the county. And just like in all other aspects, we've seen inflationary costs and pressures, contractual price changes, and those changes and pressures are reflected in this. And I will also say that it's important to note that our solid waste system actually makes money for us in our recycling programs, because Montgomery County residents do an incredible job of recycling good products that we are able to sell. and that also we are going to be expanding our composting programs to allow more people to mitigate their own food waste. I'll turn it over to Mr. Levchenko if there's anything else to add.
Just to note that the solid waste charges before you today are consistent with the council's straw vote actions on the solid waste collection fund and solid waste disposal funds. The packet notes the impact on residential and non-residential customers, which depends on the services provided to them. And also there are some increases recommended in the tipping fees at the Shady Grove Transfer Station, intended to help divert some import of trash away from the transfer station and preferably to other places, or ideally to recycling opportunities for those items. So this is consistent with the council's straw vote actions last week.
Very good. I want to thank our DEP team that is here, OMB as well, so thank you very much for your work. There is a T&E committee recommendation to approve the FY24 solid waste services charge. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Next, we are going to have a committee, a work session and action on a resolution to establish the FY24 water quality protection charge. And these are funds and fees that help keep our county's clean water initiatives that include but are not limited to restoring polluted and eroded streams, stream monitoring, storm water draining, drain cleaning and maintenance, inspection, and other areas that are protecting our water quality. The executive recommends an equivalent residential unit rate of $128, which is an increase of $8.50. But last week at full council, we actually reduced that from $128 to $126. Mr. Levchenko?
Yeah, just to note that this is the overwhelmingly dominant revenue source for the Water Quality Protection Fund is the Water Quality Protection Charge. And as you noted, the council was able to straw vote last week when it discussed this budget a slightly lower increase than what the executive had recommended. That was possible because the metrics assumed in the fiscal plan for this fund were slightly above, or a little bit above, the policy level. So there was a little bit of room to still accommodate those metrics, but at a slightly lower charge, recognizing that this appears on the property tax bill along with the property tax increase that you discussed earlier. So we're able to accommodate the fiscal plan going forward with this slightly lower rate increase.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Levchenko, and again, thank you to the DEP team. So there is a T&E committee recommendation. All those in favor of the recommendation? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have a work session and action on a resolution to approve the WSSC Water System Development Charge. And each year, both Montgomery County and Prince George's counties must approve an annual development charge and set the maximum allowable charge. The council met on May 8th, and we met with our colleagues of the Prince George's Council just last week, where we all agreed on this. And Mr. Levchenko, anything else?
Yeah, this is just the formal action by this council, consistent with all the actions you just mentioned. So I won't belabor the point, but it's exactly what the two councils agreed to last week.
Very good. There is a recommendation. All those in support of the WSSC Water System Development Charge, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Next is an action on an executive regulation 823 system benefit charge, residential waste estimates. Mr. Levchenko?
Yeah, these waste estimates are developed by DEP each year and figure into their assumptions for tonnages and how they develop the budget and rate structure for the solid waste charges. All the items we discussed during the solid waste collection fund and disposal fund discussions assumed these numbers. The county law requires that they actually be formally set, though, by regulation, and so that's why we have this regulation before us each time this year. So staff recommends approval of the regulation as it was conveyed to us by the executive.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that, as recommended by the T&E committee, that we move to approve the regulation as transmitted by the county executive.
Moved by Councilmember Balcom, seconded by Vice President Friedson. All those in favor of that motion and recommendation? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, DEP again. Thank you, Mr. Lovchenko. Okay, the penultimate item on today's agenda is a work session on the capital budget. A Herculean task, as always. And so want to express our appreciation to Dr. Orlin, Ms. McGuire, Mr. Lovchenko, and Mr. Mia for helping crunch all the numbers and do everything possible so that our infrastructure, most notably our schools and our roads, have the funding that they need to keep our community humming along over the next 6 years or so. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Lovchenko.
Yeah, we're each going to take a little bit of this since it is a pretty big topic. I did want to refresh the committee's memory as to where we started. And we've had a couple of updates before the council on what we were calling the general obligation bond gap, as we talked about it, starting with when the executive transmitted his CIP amendments and capital budget back on January 17th. At that time, we had undesignated reductions that were identified, that were conveyed by the executive of about $48 million. The executive had also recommended a higher CIP spending affordability guideline total for the 6 years, another $40 million. So we initially started with that gap that we knew the council would have to close. And then moving forward, we had other changes that occurred. We had the council's spending affordability guideline action in February. But we also had a couple other significant actions. We had a recordation tax write-down that was conveyed by the executive during his March transmittal of the operating budget and additional CIP amendments. That was about $61 million. And then, of course, the council was busy looking at its various committees and dealing with all the amendments that had come over. And especially with regard to transportation projects, the council had initially supported restoration of a number of those projects, which also contributed to the gap. And so, as noted in the packet, back in mid-April, we were looking at a gap of about $207 million across the 6 years, which is a very significant gap to close. However, a couple weeks ago, and this was referenced earlier, the council passed Bill 17-23, which revised the recordation tax rates for both the school's recordation tax and the recordation tax premium. That included, or that added about $187 million in projected revenue to the CIP, as well as some additional revenue on the operating side. So that got us a bit closer to our reconciliation. At the bottom of page 1 of the packet, we show the results of where we were prior to reconciliation. It was about a $15 million 6-year gap. Although we also still have annual challenges we have to deal with as part of reconciliation. You can see those, especially in the middle years of the CIP. So that's where we were when we started the reconciliation process. Now, it was complicated a bit by a couple of other things. First, we had an additional write-down of recordation taxes based on actuals to date through April, so 10 months of activity for FY23, and we were seeing significant reduction in school recordation tax revenue. We're not making assumptions about future years. This could be a blip, but we did feel we had to recognize what we were seeing in FY23, so we did write that down. In addition, we had the we had to deal with the potential impact of the bill that the council introduced this morning with regard to the impact tax inflation cap discussion. What we did not want to do was ignore the impact of that bill and then have to come back and reconcile the CIP again in late June. So the way we've set up this reconciliation is to accommodate the impacts of that bill, and to the degree there are changes from what we've assumed, those would flow into the set-aside and create a larger bond reserve, if you will, going into next year, which can help with the full CIP review next year. So that's where things have started. What we've done with this reconciliation is close that gap. We've also made a number of technical adjustments, and we have made some recognized production delays in a number of projects, as well as some specific cuts and deferrals that we'll talk about in more detail here. But I think the main headline I wanted to mention before we get into some of these project discussions is that we were able to accommodate all of the individual Montgomery County Public School projects and maintain them on the schedules that the board had proposed. Well, improved. Most of these were approved projects on approved schedules. So I just want to make that clear. There are some technical adjustments that you'll hear about that affect some of the school projects, but they do not affect the schedules that we were talking about. So that's very important to understand up front. And I'll turn it over to Ms. McGuire here to continue on the discussion with regard to resources.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just highlight briefly, Mr. Levchenko did describe the impact of 2 resource adjustments that we did need to take account of during reconciliation, which did increase the starting gap for reconciling expenditures to $46 million. So between as was mentioned, we did want to be sure we were being cautious around the ultimate revenue that will be realized in FY23, as well as the potential impact of any actions the council may take on the bill that was introduced this morning. We'll go ahead and move on to spending affordability.
Right. We're on page 3 now. In trying to balance the CIP, one of the things we looked at again was the spending affordability levels themselves. The council back in February confirmed the guidelines that had been approved the prior February, which was $300 million in FY23, $290 million in '24, $280 million in '25, and $270 million in the last 3 years. What we found in going through all the puts and takes here was that we didn't actually need all the resources that the guidelines would have us be able to use in FY23 and '24, but we needed those resources in the last 3 years. So the proposal in front of you would actually set the bond limits at set the bond amounts at $280 million in each of the 6 years. And what that does is it keeps it within the same level of the 6-year guideline that you approved last February. It actually goes lower than the guidelines at FY23 and '24. But what all this means is that you don't need to have a super majority vote of 8 to approve this budget. Just a normal majority vote would work. And then in terms of expenditure changes needed to reconcile the CIP, one of the things we always do is we go to the agencies this time of year and say, well, okay, you made some proposals. They're included in your budgets for the schedules of some projects, but have there been any slips, any projects that have not moved forward as quickly as had been assumed in the approved CIP? And DOT came forward actually with 5 projects. The most significant change is the Forest Land Passageway, which the executive actually recommended a 1-year delay. And as it turns out, DOT during the course of its work this year has had to experience a 1-year delay. So there's a 1-year delay in that project. It'll be finished in FY28 rather than FY27. This is a fact. I mean, there's nothing the council can really do about this now. The time has passed. MacArthur Boulevard bikeway improvements, the executive had actually recommended a 1.5-year delay, but there is a production delay of about 8 or 9 months, about half of that. And the other 3 projects, the North Bethesda Metro Station access improvements, Boyd's Transit Center, and Metropolitan Branch Trail, they're relatively minor production delays in those. And so we've captured all 5 of those in this reconciliation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Naeem.
Okay. Yeah, on page 4 of your packet, on section B, again, as Mr. Levchenko noted, these are technical adjustments to MCPS school projects. There's no change in the scope or schedule of these projects. In section C, however, these are intentional choices, policy choices made to defer or reduce certain projects. I will note that the projects are spread out across county government as well as outside agencies, so the pain, as limited as it may be, is shared. The first project is the Goldsboro Road Sidewalk and Bikeway. Staff's recommendation is essentially a 1-year delay in design and construction. The executive had recommended a 2-year delay, so this is an improvement compared to the executive's recommendation. Similarly, the Falls Road Bikeway and pedestrian facility is delayed 1 year in design and construction. The White Oak Science Gateway redevelopment project has deferred funding in FY 27 and 28 to the beyond 6 years. This is a delay compared to the executive's January submission, but an improvement over his March submission. We will, of course, look at this project with the developer over the summer and revisit this next CIP. The Legacy Open Space project reflects the round 1 non-recommended reduction, but not the round 2 reduction. The MCPS Sustainability Initiatives project reflects not funding the FY 25 increase of $2.5 million, so it keeps the funding level flat at $5 million per year. And finally, the MC Germantown Student Services Center. This actually reflects the restoration of the round 2 non-recommended reduction, which was previously approved by the council. Based on all of the other adjustments and the expression of high priority for the round 2 component, this was restored in reconciliation.
And just say if we, based on doing all these changes, we feel you have a reasonable set aside going into the FY 25 through 30 CIP next year, and you are balanced across each of the years and for the 6 years.
Well, as I said when we started this conversation, these are Herculean efforts, and it took 4 of you to help work through this so that our school construction projects continue moving forward and our road safety projects continue moving forward. But I think it's also important to note, and I'm not sure you highlighted this, just recently this council passed a change to our recordation taxes. How did that affect this process?
The recordation tax, the changes in the rate that were passed a couple weeks ago, that added about $187 million in projected revenues for the CIP. So that $200+ million gap became about a $15 million gap. So what you were seeing today was a much more marginal change with a handful of projects. If we were dealing with a $200 million gap, we would have been looking at a much longer list of projects to defer or cut.
Can you share the list of projects that we've been able to add to this list because of that recordation tax change?
Well, certainly the round 1 and round 2 cuts that the council had asked Parks, College, and MCPS, most of those with MCPS, that would have been Damascus High School and Magruder High School were both I wouldn't say they were recommended for delay by the schools, they weren't, but they were offered up as a way to meet the numbers. Highland View was also recommended for, or came over as a round 1 cut. You heard with the Montgomery College, you had the Germantown Student Services Center, the round 1 and round 2 cuts. In this, we were able to avoid the round 2 cut for that. I think those are the major ones. Outside, within county government, the transportation projects. There was about $64 million in restorations that the council supported. Most of those, perhaps all of them, would not have been able to be supported if we were looking at a $200 million gap to deal with. And Mr. Orland, did you want to?
Well, the other thing I was going to add is the other thing this covers is the executive would recommend $40 million increase in the bond spending affordability bond limits, which would increase debt over the later years, and this reconciliation basically makes it so that that was not necessary either.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that information. I think it's really important to note that Magruder is going to get the renovation. Damascus is going to get the renovation. Road projects are going to happen, and these have all been priorities of ours. I said it before, and you're going to hear me say it in a few minutes. These are priorities of ours, and if we want them to happen, we have to take the action to make them happen. They don't just happen. Funding doesn't just appear. And so while some of these conversations are hard, they're necessary, especially if we are unanimous in our support for them. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. I also, too, just wanted to express my gratitude to the staff in the moving it around. Also want to thank my co-sponsor and lead on the bill that was just discussed, Councilmember Mink, and all my colleagues who came in and made amendments, Councilmember Stewart, Councilmember Katz, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, and Council President Glass to amend that bill. I just think it can't be overstated that we are having a very different conversation today, and that these school projects are going to move forward, these transportation projects are going to move forward because we took that difficult action. Oh, and by the way, we're going to fund rental assistance and we relieved pressure on the operating budget even more as well, and protected first-time home buyers. And we can do these tough things, but we have to take tough action. I wish we would have passed it a couple years ago, but you know, we all have wishes. And here we are today. This is a real highlight of this budget, that these projects are going to be able to move forward. We heard compelling and passionate testimony from students and parents and educators about the needs. And I'm just really happy that this is going to move forward. So thank you, and look forward to supporting the recommendation. And thank you again to the staff for making it work, especially Montgomery College, who always comes in under budget and on time. And we're going to be able to remove that Germantown Student Services secondary cut. They're still taking the first cut. But we're really happy about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Great. I just wanted to add my thanks to all the work on this, to the support while we were going through looking at the recordation tax, and you know, this is great news. And Mr. Lachenko, as you start off by saying that we are going to be able to fund the school projects, because delaying those would have really been catastrophic for our families, for our community overall, for our economic development. And I'm really glad that we're moving forward with this, and just want to echo what Councilmember Jawando said, that I'm thrilled that MC's Germantown Student Service Center was able to get into this budget, as well as looking at the legacy open space. The other thing that I do like about this, and I want to recognize my colleagues who are such great champions for the Up-County Council Member Lukey and Balcom, because there were a lot of schools in the Up-County that were on the chopping block. And I think, you know, being able to do this CIP, when I look across the projects that we're moving forward with and able to fund, we are doing this across our county, and we are doing it also in a way that looks at what is most needed, and we're funding that. So I just really appreciate all your work, and I'm so glad to see this today. Thank you. I yield back my time.
Thank you. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
I just want to, I'm losing my voice. I want to thank all the staff, but I also want to thank Councilmember Will Jawando, because he has been fighting on the recordation tax from the very beginning, like me, but in different positions. But it finally happened, and it's a great thing for schools and for rental assistance and for the county overall. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
I agree with all the sentiments, expressing incredible gratitude to all of you on council staff. This has been a Herculean task that you have pulled off here, and we are tremendously grateful, and including with all of the help, Glenn, on putting together the recordation tax proposal. It's been a lot, and it's been a long process. And my deep thanks again to Councilmember Jawando for working on the recordation tax, as Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez noted, and as well to Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez for your work on this from your position as well. And it is certainly an honor of mine for this to have been my first lead sponsored bill that gets over the line, but this was such an incredible team effort, which makes it all the better. Councilmembers Stewart, Katz, and Fanny and Gonzalez for crafting the final amendment, the final proposal that got us over the line with a really fantastic bill. And as has been said, without the passage of this bill, this conversation just would have been incredibly, incredibly different today, touching, you know, every district across the county. Many projects in my own, but really all across the county. You know, being able to raise revenue for the critical transportation projects, the Montgomery College project, as well as our MCPS projects. We're now able to celebrate our ability to move forward on these things instead of, you know, the opposite. So thanks very much to everyone who worked on this, and I'm very excited to get this done today. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
I was just going to commend my colleagues on their ingenuity in coming up with this recordation tax reconfiguration. Thank you to the staff. Really excited that we are able to reinfuse more money into the budget to take care of these very important infrastructure challenges before us. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments, and again, most especially our staff for putting this all together. So we have a capital budget CIP program that is before us for FY23 to 28. All those in favor of that CIP proposal? And that is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. So the last item on today's agenda is the culmination of months of work here at the council to determine a budget for the FY24 fiscal year that provides the services and meets the needs of our extremely diverse community. And I appreciate all of staff coming together to work us through this process. Ms. Michelson, Mr. Howard, I'll turn it over to you for any additional comments.
Yeah, I think most of what we were going to say has already been said this morning, but just in summary, before you is a reconciliation list that funds $215.5 million in additions above the FY23 budget. Of that amount, $159.1 million will be going to MCPS and also to Park and Planning, the two outside agencies, and $56.4 million just to county government. So, as noted earlier, this reconciliation will reduce the FY24 tax-supported budget that was proposed by the county executive by $110.7 million. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Councilmember Alwarnoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move that we take the straw vote on the reconciliation list as it appears in the packet and commensurate with the 4.7% property tax increase we voted to support earlier.
I second that motion. Thank you.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second to adopt the FY24 budget with a reconciliation list. Councilmember Lutke.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to call the vote on the previous question or the previous motion.
Okay, there is a motion to move the previous question. Is there a second? Seconded by Council Vice President Friedson. All those in support of the previous question? That is 8. All those opposed? That is 3. Okay, the motion has been called. There's a vote before us for this FY24 operating budget and reconciliation list. All those in favor of that proposal, raise your hand. All those opposed? That is 10-1. Thank you, everybody. Let me thank you, Ms. Michelson, Mr. Howard, for that. So this is the almost conclusion of the process, and I just want to express my appreciation to everybody, especially our staff and the OMB staff. And when I was first elected to be president of the council, I promised to work collaboratively with all of my colleagues on this body and to bring greater transparency to this process. And as an at-large council member, it's been my mission to uplift the needs of residents in every corner of our community. I believe that we must build on our accomplishments here in Montgomery County to make it an even more fair and equitable place where everyone can afford to live, work, raise a family, get the best education, and age in place. And we have to meet our most vulnerable residents while also meeting the expectations for our future residents. And this budget, I believe, will continue moving Montgomery County forward. Determining the $6.8 billion budget for the FY24 fiscal year is an act of fiscal discipline and also a reflection of our moral values. And this budget is unlike any budget that this county has ever had. It is the first time in the county's history that a state law is being used to increase the property tax for Montgomery County Public Schools. Before we entertained the idea of a tax increase, we immediately began looking for savings. I set forth a process that was similar to zero-based budgeting, in which we build the budget based on the needs and resources available. I tasked our committees with conducting oversight, finding savings, and restructuring vacant positions. 5 years ago, the county executive said that he wanted to restructure county government so that our resources could be better used to support the needs of our residents. And I told the county executive at that time that I supported those goals and wanted to work with him. And during my 5 years on this council, I waited. But with this budget, we are no longer waiting. The restructuring has begun. And the county executive also introduced a budget with a 10% property tax increase. But through this council's hard work, we were able to reduce the county executive's tax proposal by more than half, while still adding more than $210 million to our school system. This is the largest increase to MCPS since before the Great Recession. More than half of the county's tax-supported budget, a little over $3 billion, will go towards supporting our school system. Like districts across the nation, the needs of our 163,000 students are diverse, and they have dramatically increased since the pandemic. And additionally, the expectations of our administrators and educators to solve these new challenges has become daunting. And during our conversation with MCPS leadership, every member of this council, and let me repeat that, every member of this council expressed our intention to fully fund the contracts for our hardworking teachers, para-educators, bus operators, and administrators. And in addition, we recently passed a progressive recordation tax that will add $200 million to accelerate vital school construction. Collectively, these actions speak volumes about the council's dedication to our schools, our educators, and our students. And in addition to supporting our school employees, we unanimously supported our contracts for our hardworking emergency and first responders, our healthcare workers, and all county employees. Each of the department and agency budgets, including all labor contracts, were supported unanimously. Unanimously. And in order to uphold our intentions, the actions we've taken today have been necessary. Stated another way, if we are intellectually honest in supporting everything in this budget, we have to support the revenues needed to carry out this budget and pay for them. And the budget that we preliminarily agree on today has also been shaped by all of our residents who made their voices heard on all of these issues, writing in, texting, tweeting, and contacting all of us, and I appreciate them for their input. This FY24 budget also continues Montgomery County's ongoing investments, not only in education, but in expanding healthcare services, providing resources for more affordable housing, increasing rental assistance, and supporting innovative ways to boost economic development. And this budget upholds our commitment to investing in key priority areas, like health and human services, making sure that our social safety net and programs have the services and support they need. Our food security programs, our shelter programs, affordable housing programs. It also supports our newly formed Economic Development Committee and the work that that committee has been undertaking, making sure that we are open for business and putting real investments into action. We're putting tens of millions of dollars into this budget that will help directly go to boosting our local economy and accelerating business development across the county. We're supporting our transportation network, making it safer for our residents to walk, ride, and take public transportation. This year alone, in 2023, we've already had more than 200 pedestrians and bicyclists struck, and 4 people have been tragically killed. But this budget dedicates $270 million toward improving our transportation networks and helping enact Vision Zero to make our roads safer for everybody. With regard to the environment, we have a lot of work to do to combat climate change, to ensure the health and vitality of Montgomery County's future. And if we are to continue our pledge, which I'm committed to ensuring that we have an 80% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2027 and eliminating them completely by 2035, we have to continue doing everything we can to investing in green technology and green infrastructure. And that's what we've done with the DEP budget and with our Green Bank program as well. With public safety, we're continuing to invest and strengthen public safety to make sure that everybody feels welcome, safe, and seen here in Montgomery County. And this budget provides support for our fire and rescue services, including some long-delayed construction improvements. And we've also provided additional funding for our nonprofit security grants to make sure that our faith-based institutions have support they need to combat hate crimes that have run rampant across the region and the country. We want to make sure that hate has no place here in Montgomery County. And in closing, I just want to say that this budget has been large and complex, and least of all, it has been challenging. But if you look at the level of scrutiny, the level of oversight, and the level of transparency, all of which is on YouTube for everyone to see, we have done something that this body has not done before. And I think that is incredibly important. It has taken an all-hands-on-deck approach, and it has been a true collaborative process. I want to thank all of my colleagues for their work, especially the 6 new council members. This was a hard budget to enter into, but you took the assignment seriously, and I appreciate your thoughts and your hard work. And I also want to express my appreciation to the hard work of my personal team: David Lorenzo, Joy Champalou, Hope Klein, Pam Luckett, Dory Hightower, and of course want to thank my Chief of Staff, Valeria Carranza, for helping manage this budget through this body. That too has been a Herculean effort. And want to express my appreciation to our hard-working central staff here, our Executive Director, Marlene Michelson, our Deputy Director, Craig Howard, our outgoing clerk, Judy Rupp, our new clerk, Sarah Tenenbaum, our Racial Equity Manager, Selena Singleton, our Legislative Officer, Sonia Healy, and her team, our Director of the Office of the Legislative Oversight, Chris Seiler, our Information Technology team, and all of the staff, and also the staff at OMB for their work to put this together. You know, finally, all of this is hard, and tough decisions have to be made, but I'm pleased of what we've been able to do because I believe it puts us on a strong path forward. And so thank you, everybody, for their work. And I'll turn it over to Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to colleagues. I have deep concerns about this budget that was predicated from the start on a false narrative that a 10% property tax increase was needed to fund education. It didn't solve our overwhelming vacancy challenges, it added to them. It didn't increase revenues to address the structural deficit. It actually helped to create the structural deficit by using one-time revenues to fund ongoing expenses. There was a suggestion in this budget that we could somehow do everything all at once without any meaningful restructuring within county government to make it all work. The county executive has put this council in an impossible position, and I appreciate the way that this expanded body approached its work in extremely challenging circumstances. 2 months is simply not enough time for a legislative body to review every single vacant position and closely scrutinize every single program. When we asked for the county executive to recommend reductions to the approximately 1,500 vacancies, we were offered another Band-Aid, known as lapse, to gloss over the underlying issues. We need the county executive to fulfill his commitment over 2 campaigns and in 5 budget cycles to do the type of reorganizing and restructuring he promised, to work with labor partners and stakeholders to find a better way to utilize resources so we can provide services our residents need, expect, and deserve, to manage county government, and to lead our county. This budget supports many priorities we all share. It supports teachers, public safety professionals, and public employees at a time when they're working harder than ever. Funds public education at historic levels to meet unprecedented challenges in and out of the classroom, and it safeguards critical services for some of our community's most vulnerable residents. While there are many aspects of this budget I sincerely appreciate and strongly support, there are many tough choices I wish we had made to avoid even more difficult decisions in the future. I'm very concerned with the number of new positions we're adding at a time when we can't even come close to filling the positions we already have. I'm troubled by the volume of one-time revenues used to fund ongoing expenses and what that means for fiscal sustainability over time, and the very near-term potential for the need for draconian cuts to critical services or future tax increases. I'm disheartened that the council's recommendations for PAYGO to fund capital projects and spending affordability guidelines were completely ignored in the county executive's recommended budget, as were many of our established fiscal policies, developed in the aftermath of the last recession and needed perhaps more than ever as we head towards another potential downturn. I've been deeply disappointed by how people and priorities were pitted against one another in an unprecedented fashion. Until we change that level of public discourse, it will be very hard to have the type of constructive, collaborative conversations that are so necessary to make nuanced decisions in a sustainable and a responsible way. My concerns and reservations have been clear throughout this process, and they remain as we finish it. This budget funds many critical priorities, but it doesn't make the type of tough decisions needed to avoid tougher and harsher decisions next year and beyond. It's not the budget I would have proposed myself, and it is not without its glaring deficiencies. But this is a body now of 11, not a body of 1, and I respect and appreciate the will of my colleagues. We need a budget to fund the government, even if it isn't the budget with which I would be most comfortable. Unlike some on Capitol Hill, I don't believe we should hold the government hostage due to policy disagreements, even very significant ones. So soberly and cautiously, I will yield to the will of the body and vote to approve this budget, recognizing that it will create even tougher decisions as we move forward. And with appreciation for colleagues, and with that, Mr. President, I'll yield back to you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Council President. So this is the 10th budget I have worked on since being an elected official. And last week I talked about how I generally approach budgets in the past by asking myself how we best address the needs of today and prepare for tomorrow. As has already been said today, we are in a tough year here in Montgomery County. When we received the budget in March, I had some major concerns. I was concerned that we were given not only, what we were given not only had flaws related to what I saw as a steep tax rate that was too much for residents, but we also had items funded using one-time funds like ARPA or our spikes in our income tax revenue. And that's not going to last. Because of this budget may create long-term structural problems with our county finances, I have deep concerns. So today I'm speaking with reservations about this budget and a concern that it will be necessary for our county to have mid-year savings plans and special appropriations that are funded by our reserves. I do want to highlight just 2 areas I have concerns with, and I hope as a body we can take up. Our unhoused population. I truly believe that we have not included enough funding for overflow sheltering in this current budget, and I worry about the support that we're giving to partners such like Interfaith Works. As we've seen, and we learned this during our budget cycle, this was new information we were given just last week, that even though we had been seeing decreases in our unhoused populations, we are now seeing pretty significant upswings. And so this is something we just received as we were going through the budget process, and I hope we can return to it. Mental health is another area. I expressed concerns when I first read the county executive's budget on this, and I'm still, wondering as we look at this budget, are we adequately addressing the mental health crisis taking place in our county? Even with these concerns, I know there are also wins for today. First, I'm very thankful to my colleagues for finding savings in these very complicated budgets. We also were able, as we've talked about a moment ago, pass the recordation tax that, as we saw, really helped with our CIP budget and took some of the relief off our operating budget. And again, just want to thank my colleagues for that, because I think it really closed the gap in the short term and sets us up for long-term planning for the future. And I will say I'm very proud to serve as the chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee and the work we've done. And I just want to really thank Councilmember Katz and Vice President Friedson for working together. The one thing I do want to highlight that I think was a huge achievement of government operations in this budget was the excellent conversation we had about community grants and putting forward additional bridge funding for nonprofits that will allow those that are currently funded with some sense of certainty through the end of December as our new Office of Grants Management comes online and creates new processes for our county grants. These nonprofits do critical work, and I'm very glad that we were able to put into this budget and this reconciliation that bridge funding. This is something that we worked really hard on, and I'm glad it's there. The other thing is, and not such a sexy thing, the OPEB funding that we talked about a lot. I think people know more about our non-pension benefits for retirees than maybe any other year, and that's a good thing because we're going to continue that conversation, and I'm glad that in this budget we are funding it at the level we need to. I'm also very happy that we're able to fund our public union contracts. The job market has been extremely competitive, and that's true. But more than that, we are investing in the most valuable asset we have here in Montgomery County, our workforce. And there are those who see this as a line item in our budget, but I see the people who show up every single day to work for members of our community, and I thank you, and I'm glad we were able to fund that. I wish we were able to fund the Office of Human Resources a bit more, and I just want to do a shout out and thank the Director Anderson for all her work on this and the positive direction she is taking that department. I do want to just quickly address our efforts related to Montgomery County Public Schools budget. This was something that we talked about at great length last week, and I just want to underscore, even with the tax rate that we move forward today in the budget we have, I want to make it clear that when I casted my vote for this budget, and as I said last week, I'm doing so asking MCPS to fully fund the contracts that have been negotiated, the whole contract as negotiated. Other places that we've put in funding where is needed, and I'm very proud of, is the Working Families Income Supplement to assist those most in need in our communities and fight poverty. Increase the nonprofit security grants to assist in creating safe environments for people where they worship and gather. And our funding for youth programs, adult daycare, and for our disability community. And so at the end of the day, after much contemplation, I will, as I think Council Vice President said so well, that this is the will of the body. And I very much deeply respect the work of my colleagues and look forward to working together and moving forward with this. So in closing, I also want to thank my staff. They've done a huge amount of work these last couple of months. To my Chief of Staff, Cecily Thorne, my Deputy, Paul Ellis, my Legislative Aide, Juan Aragon Malan, and my Scheduler, Lored Kaveen, thank you for all of your work that you've done. And again, in closing, thank you so much to the Council Central staff and all your work on this. I know it's been a difficult budget for you all, and you have 6 new offices of people and their first budget, and I just want to say thank you for your your patience, your insights, and the continued conversation. And it truly is an honor for me to sit up here with all of you and to work in this county. Because I know where we may disagree on certain things, I know we all agree on the goal that we are working towards and that we are all working for the residents of this county. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Malcolm.
Okay, I'm getting all choked up here. I first want to thank the staff, our council central staff, my office staff, and the executive staff who were involved in preparing this budget. It was a major undertaking, and I know it required a lot of hours, a lot of nights, and a lot of weekends, and so thank you for your service. As an organizational psychologist, I believe in process. And looking at a budget, there are two important components of any budget. It basically comes down to how much money do I have and how much money do I need to spend. If there's a delta, one has to decide either to raise more money or cut spending. Very often it's both. The council started the budget process back in February in a very thoughtful, rational way in order to determine our spending affordability guidelines. We looked at many factors, including revenue projections, debt capacity, the adequacy of our reserves, various economic forecasts, and projected revenue from the state. Given all those factors, the council agreed unanimously and publicly as to how much the county could realistically spend going into the 24 budget. We do this very important step at the beginning of the process to help guide our decisions as we move forward. Unfortunately, the county executive ignored any reference to the agreed upon spending affordability guidelines and recommended, in my opinion, an outrageous, fiscally irresponsible budget totaling $6.8 billion, which is $500 million or 7.7% more than last year's budget. Not only was there an assumption of a 10% tax increase this year, the recommended budget created a structural deficit that would equate to a 7% increase next year without any additional funding. As this is my first budget, I can't really compare it to prior years. What I can say is that receiving this proposed budget with a 10% tax increase was a non-starter from the very beginning for all of us. As you might imagine, with 11-member body, we didn't necessarily agree on which programs to cut or where the final tax rate should be, but we all began the very difficult work of getting that number down. My primary goals were to ensure that the teachers were adequately compensated and that we could provide the necessary public safety resources we need to make our community safe. After a thorough review of the $3.2 billion MCPS budget, the full council has conveyed our unanimous intent to fully fund the teacher's contract. Even though by law the council does not have control over the allocation of funds that we provide to MCPS, I have every faith that that will happen. We have also fully funded the contracts for our police and our firefighters. I'm also pleased to say that we were able to fund many critical programs for our community, including the libraries, parks, and additional medical services to rural areas. We managed to also get some funding put back in the budget for critical projects in my district, District 2, a portion of Observation Drive, which is desperately needed, and the Student Services Center at Germantown campus, partial funding back. And I want to thank my colleagues for their support in making that happen. All that said, this has been a very emotional discussion for our community. I know that we have disappointed people on both sides of the issue. Many people want more funding for schools, while we also have a large number of residents who want no new taxes. In the end, I vote for the compromise, both for the tax rate and the budget. As an active participant in getting the tax rate as low as possible, at the same time advocating for line item funding, I felt that it would be disingenuous for me to not vote for the end result. I appreciate and respect the votes that my colleagues have taken today, and I agree with much of what has been said. Thank you for your honesty and your passion for our community, and I so appreciate serving with you, with all of you, and it's been really a great experience. And we're only 6 months in. So now we need to look to the future. There is a general thought among many of our residents that the county has enough money to do everything we need to do. The reality is, I don't know if that's true or not. The council's review of this budget was primarily limited to the proposed FY24 departmental increases versus taking a deep dive into the base budget, and that's just not good enough. As difficult as this budget has been, we are going to be in the exact same spot a year from now. I have long been a proponent of zero-based budgeting to determine how much it costs or how much it should cost to run the government. And the only way out of this downward spiral is to take a very close look at every dime we spend to determine that, how to more effectively spend our taxpayer dollars. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves to make that happen. I know my colleagues are ready to do that hard work, and I look forward to working together to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate and share the optimism. Council Member Sales.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to start off by thanking you for your leadership in getting us to this point. Your staff, Ms. Marlene Michelson, Craig Howard, our central staff, and the executive staff for leading us through a challenging budget season, where more than half of our first 11-member body are new council members. It is true what they say, laws are like sausages. It's better not to see them being made. But we did make what has seemed like a secretive process very transparent. We hung in there and we got it done. With this budget, we can all be proud of where we are today as a team. I would like to thank my colleagues for a truly collaborative process. Each of you cared and wanted the best outcome for our children and residents. This budget accomplishes that. I like the reconciliation list. As a visual person, that list really helped to showcase each of our committee's changes and allowed me to better understand each committee's approach to the budget recommendations. At the onset of this process, I said that I would be guided by the tenets of my SMART agenda, which I ran on, apply a racial equity and social justice lens, a laser focus on data-driven dialogue, genuine accountability, compassion, and empathy for those who have no voices around our table. I am so proud that we have been able to support our frontline workers who kept us safe throughout the pandemic, while many of us worked remotely from the safety of our homes. From first responders to educators, we found a way to fund contracts of our hard-working county government employees and educators. The resources within the MCPS $3 billion budget provide opportunities for creatively reimagining ways to teach our children and address the learning loss in a post-pandemic 21st century world. A special shout out to Essie McGuire for leading us through the intricacies of the school system's budget, which is easily half of our county's budget. You supported us with grace and organization, and I appreciate that. As a Health and Human Services Committee member, I am proud of our work under Chair Gabe Albornoz's fearless leadership, and to my partner in crime, Don Luthke, for engaging in thoughtful discussions under challenging circumstances to protect our vulnerable residents. The budget process was my first as a council member, but my fifth as an elected official. And as overwhelming as it sometimes was, coming from a city with zero debt and paying as you go, being handed a budget with a 10% deficit was quite daunting. There were exciting opportunities to examine how we conduct business despite the challenges. I've been very open about my desire to build consensus with my colleagues and key stakeholders to change the government through structural and strategic processes. I appreciate the documented thoughts of Council President Glass and Councilmember Albornoz, who have shared their desire for the council to work with the school system and others to approach the budget collaboratively with mutual respect, more transparency, and accountability. Every council member I have spoken with is committed to doing business differently, and I look forward to ongoing discussions with my colleagues, the executive, and his team moving forward. Finally, words cannot begin to describe my deep appreciation for my staff, for staying up day and night to work on this massive budget and all of the other demands that your life involves. I could not have done it without you. Thank you, and I look forward to resting a bit after this ride. I yield.
Here's to staff. Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Every year we gather to discuss the budget process and acknowledge its challenges. But let me again say this year has been the toughest one I have witnessed since my tenure on the council and before. And I assure you that's no exaggeration. As you've heard me say many times, you can even hook me up to a lie detector that has to confirm it. Our county has faced an immense storm with the pandemic. We swiftly implemented life-saving programs and safety net services to meet the needs of our residents. While President Biden may have declared the end of the national emergency on May 11th, the needs of our county's residents who still rely on these pandemic services have not diminished. It is crucial to maintain and sustain these programs and services as the demand is unlikely to change anytime soon. The influx of federal funding has been instrumental in supporting these efforts. However, as the deadline for utilizing these funds approaches, we must ensure our county can incorporate these expenses to keep these vital programs and services afloat. The pandemic has also exacerbated the demand for hiring staff within our government and schools. We are not alone in this struggle. Our neighboring jurisdictions are facing similar challenges and seeking ways to meet their growing needs. In Montgomery County, we made a commitment to our most valuable resources, our employees. We provided significant compensation and benefit increases to our government workers, police officers, firefighters, corrections officers, teachers, and many others who form the backbone of our county. It is their dedication that makes our community such a special place to live, work, and find a sense of belonging. This budget is a reflection of our values and what is truly important to our community. Over half of our budget is allocated to Montgomery County Public Schools, demonstrating that our children are a priority. This year, our funding level represents a historic increase, reaffirming our commitment to invest in our teachers, staff, and students. We believe that our school staff deserve the compensation increase agreed upon for this year to attract and retain the teachers we need. To accommodate the substantial increase requested by the school system, the council had increased revenue funding through a property tax adjustment. Though thoughtful and deliberate decision-making, the council, with the hard work of the council president and his staff, managed to reduce the amount from the county executive's recommended level. This balancing act allowed us to address the pressing needs of our schools, which have been severely impacted by the pandemic, experiencing staff shortages and struggling student test scores. Our budget also delivers well-deserved inflationary increases to our nonprofit sector and developmentally disability providers. We recognize the indispensable role they play in keeping our most vulnerable residents safe and providing the necessary safety net services. Additionally, we have allocated funding for the Working Families Income Supplement, ensuring a continuance of a county match to federal EITC refund when combined with state funds. To address our county's capital projects, including schools, libraries, recreation centers, and affordable housing, we needed to reassess and increase the recordation tax. The increase will help fund these vital projects that contribute to the overall well-being of our community. As the chair of the Public Safety Committee, I understand the repercussions of a shortage of public safety personnel, both in terms of service reduction and community safety. Therefore, we have allocated resources in order to help recruit and retain police officers. We are experiencing a nationwide shortage of police officers, and Montgomery County is feeling those effects, as we are currently down more than 130 officers. To enhance our competitiveness in the region, we have implemented a $20,000 bonus for newly sworn officers. However, it is important to note that our department remains understaffed, which directly affects services delivery. Furthermore, we have prioritized the needs of our fire and rescue service. Our budget includes 11 new positions to address the impact on community services and improve operational efficiency. Additionally, we have allocated resources to provide mental health supports and services for our firefighters and emergency personnel, recognizing the critical importance of their well-being. For our county's Department of Corrections, we have begun to resume necessary services, and I'm happy to report the reopening of our pre-release center, which has been closed since 2020 due to the pandemic. We have implemented nurse retention bonuses to support critical department operations. Moreover, we have provided increased resources and equipment for officers as well as mental health support. Our budget also includes inflationary increases for medical services and clothing. Considering the disturbing upward trend in hate crimes incidents, we have increased funding for our nonprofit security grant program, specifically for organizations and facilities at a higher risk of such incidents. The Anti-Defamation League recently released that over 100 incidents were reported to them in Maryland in 2022. This is a 98% increase in incidents, with more than half of them occurring in Montgomery County. It is imperative for us to continue to address these issues and allocate the necessary resources to combat these crimes. We worked through a challenging budget and fiscal environment this year, and I want to publicly thank our Council President, Evan Glass, for his able leadership in navigating us through these stormy seas. I extend my gratitude to my esteemed colleagues on the Public Safety Committee, Councilmember Dawn Lukey and Councilmember Kristen Mink, for their thoughtful perspectives and insightful discussions during our budget deliberations. I would like to also express my appreciation to Susan Farag, who I consider an invaluable member of my staff, for her input and guidance. Special thanks are due to the Government Operations Committee Chair Kate Stewart and my colleague Vice President Andrew Friedson for their dedication and commitment to addressing the challenging issues within the other committee that I serve. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to all my fellow council members for rising to the task of this incredibly challenging budget and for their collaborative efforts in getting this done. I'm grateful to our Council Administrator Marlene Michelson, Deputy Council Administrator Craig Howard, and our entire Council Central staff for keeping us informed and guiding us through this process. My office and its hardworking team deserve recognition for their diligent work, especially my Chief of Staff, Sharon Ledner. This budget was a team effort, and it took a village, or perhaps in our case, it took 2 villages to bring it together. In closing, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the residents of Montgomery County. Your support, engagement, and invaluable testimony during the county budget process has been crucial. We understand that these have been challenging times, and yet you have persevered and shown resilience. I want to assure you that your voices have been heard, and we have strived to address your concerns and aspirations in this budget. It is your unwavering support that empowers us as a council to take on the hard issues and find innovative solutions. Together, we have weathered this storm of the pandemic and its far-reaching effects. Thank you, and may our county thrive and flourish. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. I first want to acknowledge and thank all my colleagues for their work, as well as central staff and my office staff, Michelle, Dave, Marisa, Christina, who have worked really hard and diligently throughout this process. I want to thank the Education and Culture Committee members, Kristen Mink and Councilmember Albanaz, Councilmember Kristen Mink and Councilmember Albanaz, as well as all the staff, Mr. McGuire, and everyone who helps staff us, and all the many joint committee staffers. The council was presented with a budget from the county executive that reflected unprecedented need across the county and called for additional revenue specifically to support our public school system. I first want to highlight some of the things I'm happy for. I think you should start with the good. When people ask me good news or bad news, I always say good. School construction, we talked about. Critical. So happy we're going to move that forward. Rent relief. There are over 130,000 families in Montgomery County that are hanging on by a thread and trying to pay their rent. They're going to have some help, and we're going to hopefully continue to pass policies that will help them as well. Guaranteed income. Wealth and income inequality are one of the biggest challenges of our time, and this is a proven strategy for helping residents who are struggling. I'm thankful for the additional funding that we've included for MoCo Boost, which is our guaranteed income pilot I initiated with Councilmember Albornoz, and all county colleagues supported this budget and last budget to invest our dollars in the hands of working families. Other jurisdictions around the country are looking to us because of our leadership. Summer Rise. As the inaugural director of Summer Rise, I'm filled with pride and joy to see the program at Worksession Montgomery now continuing, having helped thousands of students and now serving 644 students this year. I can't wait for it to continue to grow and help more students get work-based learning experiences and explore careers here in our county. Libraries. Our libraries have been a lifeline during the pandemic, and I'm so pleased that we're completing the last library renovation of our 22 existing library cycles, and we're going to make progress towards building our new libraries and refreshing others. They've done great work throughout the pandemic, but also in hiring and retaining high-quality staff. Montgomery College. We're so lucky to have a top-rate Montgomery College, one of the best community colleges in the nation, and they're doing work every day around education and career development. And I'm so excited that we're going to see their expansion at the East County Education Center and other projects, including the Germantown Student Services Center, that will be updated. Just this week, I was honored to attend graduations of 250 dual enrollment students who got their college degree before they got their MCPS diploma, which they'll do here in the next weeks, and 100 ACES students who are college students that are moving on from communities, many of them, 85% the first to graduate from college. Our mission and my mission as a council member is to expand opportunity. And as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, I know the power of educators and mentors who can shape who we are in the world. The surest path to greater opportunity is through education. And many people have come to our county because of our strong commitment to education. I'm concerned that our commitment to our schools is faltering exactly when we need it to be most steadfast. That's why my highest priority in this budget was to ensure that our students and educators have the resources they need to succeed. The only way to retain the high quality of teaching that parents and residents expect for our school system is to support it. It's the largest, the 14th largest in the country, the largest in the state, with more than 24,500 staff, 211 schools, 1,500 school buses, and 162,000 plus students. Now, while we have many competing budget priorities, including inflation costs, new state mandates, and increasing needs for vulnerable residents, we have to recognize the social determinants that impact education. We have the highest number of students dealing with mental health crises right now, affordable housing. We also have 43% of our students in poverty. And this is coming out of a pandemic that was once in a lifetime, when it costs more to deliver services, when everything costs more. I'm glad that we were able to invest in the compensation increases for our workers and our public safety professionals and our county government workers who are focused every day on improving the lives of their fellow residents. We've heard the concerns about increased property taxes and that it would put a strain on some members of our community. And we've worked to try to minimize that to the extent possible by also recognizing the collective need and strain that I just talked about in our schools and our public safety professionals and other county government officials who provide services are feeling every day. We have to get the restructuring going. I appreciate the county executives and OMB's commitment that that's going to happen. We need to see it. The Education and Culture Committee has worked hard to hold the school system accountable. We've had in-depth sessions during this budget, and we will continue to do that. But we cannot fund long-term success on one-time money. We have to invest in the tools and resources our educators need, not just for their salaries, but for our students that they're supporting. I finally want to say something about transparency. We began the year with the promise of openness and honesty on this council, but yet when it came to the most impactful decisions regarding this budget, there's been disappointing lack of transparency. The tax increase, the items selected for the reconciliation list, were all decided behind closed doors. The priority and high priority categories are misnomers. Each committee spent time labeling budget items and put them in these categories thinking that they might be funded along with the public. Not a single item on the priority list was part of the so-called reconciliation process. A better name for the priority list would have been the not fund list, because they received no discussion, no consideration, and ultimately no funding. I've heard from residents, nonprofit partners, and agencies even this morning that many thought they were left with the false impression of what the council was doing. It was confusing to the public and to many council members and staff. We can and must do better. And while there's no perfect budgeting process, we need to set clear expectations for the public, define the process clearly for council members to make informed decisions, and have the hard discussions about how we prioritize funding in front of the public. Without transparency, we continue to see distrust in government. I hope that we will continue to improve this process going forward. I like the idea of Councilmember Balcom and zero-based budgeting, because when you start from the FY23 budget, that's not how you start a budget in your household. We started, what do we need this year? What are the challenges that we have and opportunities this year? That's where the budget should start, not from a previous year's budget. So I voted for this budget because it's a moral document and we need to fund the things in it, but we need to continue to improve so that everyone in our county can live, learn, work, and play, and thrive in our county. I'm hopeful that we can do that as we move forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Albernaz.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. President. And I mentioned in my comments earlier that this was one of the most unsettling feelings I've had at the conclusion of a budget process since the recession. And I want to expand on that a little bit. Some of that's external, some of that's internal. And externally, there are many challenges that are beyond the reach of this local government that there's not much we can do to address. The dysfunction and the toxic energy that we're seeing in our federal government right now, which the most latest iteration is the game of chicken to see what happens with our national debt limit, is just another example of dysfunction at the federal level that bleeds through to the local level and impacts our operations and our residents every day. We also saw the dumpster fire in a runaway freight train of a town hall last week, which is unfortunately a precursor of what do we expect in this upcoming presidential election cycle, which will once again bring out the worst in too many of us and remind us that we have to choose civility here in Montgomery County. We have to ensure that we hold the line and demonstrate as public officials that we can work collaboratively and will work collaboratively to address some of the most complex needs that have faced our community in generations. And so I'm proud of the work that has been done through this budget process, but recognize, as has been noted, it's a constant shift and change. Every budget is different. They're like snowflakes. No two are the same. But we do see many of the factors that are repeated over time. We've had to go through recessions before as a county government. We've had challenges with inflation that have bled into our local government as well. But we have continued to weather that storm because we've weathered that storm together. This 20th council and this 6th county executive will have 3 more budgets that we have to work on collaboratively together. We also need to continue to work with our partners in the Board of Education, MNC PPC, and all of the ancillary government agencies who make up what I think is one of the strongest local governments in all of the United States of America. And many others agree. We have a long-standing tradition of making sure that we provide high-quality services and that we are a transparent government. And while it's never perfect, I think there's more that we can do moving forward to ensure that some of the complexities that we address during this budget process aren't repeated in the future. I appreciate the council president beginning the process this year with what did feel like a zero-based budget. But moving forward, I think some of the lessons learned are, if we are going to continue with that approach, which I think is appropriate, we have to make sure that we work earlier in the process with our colleagues in the executive branch and in our colleagues in the Board of Education so that we're not rushed in the end to make very complex decisions in a manner that feels sometimes a bit overwhelming. But let me state how impressed I was with my 6 new colleagues who really did an extraordinary job of really hitting the ground running, asking tough questions, following up, and acknowledging that there's a lot that we can improve upon together. We've done it before, we'll do it again. And as has been noted many times, we will be back again here next year with, unfortunately, decisions that will look very different than the ones that we made this time. The decisions this year weren't whether or not we were going to grow. We grew pretty significantly and historically, but how much? Next year, it will likely be how much we are going to have to take away, because some of the economic conditions are going to make those decisions for us. But I feel confident that working collaboratively year-round, not just in the several months leading up to the budget process and through it, that we'll be in a better position next year to weather what will inevitably be another storm that we will have to face together. But despite those challenges, there are a lot of great things in this budget. And I do want to begin by recognizing my colleagues on the Health and Human Services Committee. Council members Lutke and Sales were outstanding partners. And I think that we were able to achieve a lot collectively as a body to hold the line on ensuring that we enhance the social safety net, which we know is saving lives, and we know improving the quality of life, especially of our most vulnerable residents. Specifically, we have continued the efforts laid bare by previous councils, and especially last year when I served as my 1 year as council president, to work with our partners in the community on achieving, I think, a very achievable goal, which is ending childhood hunger here in Montgomery County. There was a $3 million investment in our service consolidation hubs, the formation and the development and what will now be the execution of the strategic plan to end childhood hunger. The Office of Food System Resilience was fully funded in this budget. And we have also, working with Councilmember Sales, who is our lead to address health inequities in our community, made further investments to build upon the momentum that we established during COVID by enhancing the work of our incredible partner organizations, such as the Minority Health Initiatives and Programs, but also increasing the primary care reimbursement rate for Montgomery Cares. We have also added $100,000 for support for medical services under Care for Kids. We thank you, Councilmember Balcom, for acknowledging the importance of the mobile health clinic, particularly in reaching some of our communities such as Poolsville, that will be necessary for us to meet the community where they are to address some of the public health disparities as opposed to waiting for them to come to us. And as was noted by Councilmember Katz, we made further enhancements in supporting the incredible organizations that provide support and love to the developmental disability community by not only supporting the county executive's recommended 2% increase to those contracts, but adding 2% on top of it. We also worked on eviction prevention with over $1.7 million in increases, and the Working Families Income Supplement was funded by this council, and that's another area of an example of where we need to work collaboratively with the county executive. And while we wanted to do more, we did support the county executive's additional 3% inflationary adjustments for our nonprofit organizations who are performing critical work in our community. We also did make further enhancements and support our public safety professionals, which is something that we can be proud of. And the first priority in this budget was ensuring that we honored our incredible public servants here in Montgomery County by supporting the salary and compensation of our public servants at all levels of county government, because we are only good as the remarkable public servants that we have providing these services day in and day out. While we were able to achieve a lot in this budget that I'm proud of, clearly there's much more we will need to do. And as I stated earlier, there will be 3 more budgets from which to work from to address those needs. I want to end by thanking a lot of people, but I want to start with my staff, led by my Chief of Staff, Beth Schumann, Kristen Tribble, Shaban Davenport, Jackie Rivera-Oven, and Maida Bayonet, who I really appreciated Councilmember Sales getting emotional when talking about her staff. People don't fully understand the amount of work that they have to do year-round, but particularly in these 3 months where they have so much to process and crunch. I do want to thank our council president and his staff who work even harder. I know that in the first person, trying to bring all of this together. And I also want to thank Chairman Jawando, who did an outstanding job in his first year leading the Education and Culture Committee. There were moments where I thought, man, I should have stayed on public safety, especially this time. But I do appreciate his leadership during these difficult moments, and I appreciated the collaboration with Council Mink and her team on the Education and Culture Committee. And I do want to thank the extraordinary, and I do mean extraordinary, staff here in our central office, which once again works diligently to make all of this look easy. And believe me, it is not. I want to thank Ms. Michelson and Mr. Howard for their dedication and leadership, but I particularly want to thank Ms. Essie McGuire, Ms. Tara Clemens-Johnson, and Ms. Vivian Yao, who helped staff the Health and Human Services Committee. And I just want to give a big shout out to Ms. Clemens-Johnson. This was her first big budget that she worked on, and it was seamless. She had big shoes to fill, and she filled them very, very well. So while I'm tired too, and we'll hopefully take a nap soon, I am optimistic about the future of our community and our county. I remain relentlessly optimistic about the future of our county. And it's because of our residents. The way they step forward and provide support, whether through their passionate testimony on you name the issue, or them making sacrifices on behalf of all of us. I can't thank our residents enough. We will continue to do our best while we have these positions to do right by all of you. And with that, I yield back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Albornoz. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Thank you. I have said this before, and I will say it again. I believe we must increase our tax base to bring in more jobs, attract new businesses, and that way increase more revenue for the county. Revenue we need to afford all the social needs we have. The decision we make today on this historic operating budget, alongside the decisions we make as a county council on legislative proposals, affect our county's budget. Are we going to be a county that raises taxes in order to fund the things we need and want, while passing policies that move investment away, policies that move away the need of building more housing, policies that do not attract businesses? What kind of county government are we going to be? Are we going to be reckless, or are we going to lead with fiscal responsibility while upholding our values? Knowing clearly what I want, that I want my county to prosper for everyone regardless of income level or where they were born or how they look or sound, since day one, my focus for this budget has been on ensuring we deliver outstanding services for county residents while holding all departments and agencies accountable and in a fiscally responsible manner, period. I'm happy that this budget fully funds contracts with first responders, county staff, teachers, and administrators. I have said it before, and I will say it again, I believe in the right to organize at the workplace and fully support our unions to fund their contracts, period. So I'm happy that this operating budget fully funds all union contracts from McGeo, SCIU 500, the Teachers Union, to the Fraternal Order of Police, and all of the others. Their contracts are fully funded with this operating budget. On the Montgomery County Public School budget, the budget we are approving today provides sufficient resources to fully fund the teacher, administrator, and paraeducator contracts, and continue critical programs to address the achievement gap. Full stop. Indeed, this MCPS budget is an 8.5 increase in county funding over last year and a 13.8% increase in county funding alone over the last 2 years combined. And I'm looking at Ms. McGuire, and she's going like this, just to back me up. Thank you for that, because I need reassurance every now and then. I am also happy that this budget minimizes as much as possible the increase of the tax burden on residents, particularly those who are struggling to make ends meet at home. Cutting things down from both the priority and high priority list was very hard. It was also hard not to see some of the budget items that I personally really wanted for my district. I'm not gonna say which ones, but I really, really wanted them, and they're gone. I was successful in getting several things, but not everything. And that's part of working on this budget alongside 10 other council members that I actually like. Rising costs, I do, guys. Rising costs across the board are putting tremendous pressure on working families. And I say that to respond to those who think that a 10% property tax increase is not a big deal. It is a huge deal, especially for low-income families. Yes, I'm mad. So we're dealing with a housing shortage and stagnant wages. That is not an opinion, that is a fact. Just yesterday, this council received the 4th quarter of the Montgomery County economic indicators. By the way, I already scheduled a meeting for the Economic Development Committee to go over this latest report. This meeting will take place on June 12th. Meanwhile, I took a quick look at this latest set of economic indicators for the county and noticed 3 things. 1, total employment in Maryland in the DC metro area remains below the numbers before the pandemic. 2, the office vacancy rate in Montgomery County is above DC metro. That's not bueno, not good. 3, multifamily rent has been increasing at a higher rate in Maryland and Montgomery County compared to the DC metro. Numbers don't lie, period. The budget we received from the county executive presented significant challenges. In addition to the highest proposed tax increase in recent memory, maybe ever, it added new positions and new programs without funding offsetting reductions. If approved as is, it will have led the county down a dangerous path, forcing deep cuts, new tax increases, and potentially jeopardizing our AAA bond rating as soon as next year. That's not good. Faced with these challenges, the council dug deeply into each and every department budget to identify efficiencies and more properly align resources with our priorities and values. As chair of the Economic Development Committee, I led the committee in making strategic decisions to support the highest performing and most effective economic development programs at the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, the Urban District, Alcohol Beverages Services, and I got $1 million from them on our very last work session. Let's not forget that. And more. I'm confident that we have set up the departments under the committee's jurisdiction for success as they seek to grow the county's economy. I appreciate my colleagues on the committee, Council President Glass and Council Members Sells and Balcom in undertaking this difficult task with me. Honestly, I think I have the best committee because you guys make it happen. I really do love you. I'd like to highlight a few key priorities for District 6 in the budget. Number 1, the Wheaton Arts and Culture Center is funded for construction as part of the joint affordable housing development with the Montgomery Housing Partnership. Thank you so much to our county executive, Mark Elrich, Director Dice, and MHP for making this happen. 2, the Randolph Road Corridor Study to understand community needs in relation to traffic safety, regional connectivity, environmental sustainability, and economic development. 3, the vital health programs that support residents in my district, the ones that Council Member Gabe Albornoz mentioned in his speech, as well as the Working Families Income Supplement that also impacts my district residents. Those are my highlights. Finally, I'd like to thank Council President Glass for his tireless efforts to bring this incredibly difficult budget across the finish line And one of the best things about Council President Glass is his Chief of Staff, Valeria. So thank you, Valeria. I'd also like to thank my colleagues for their many valuable contributions to this budget and Council staff for the rigorous and always excellent analysis. I'm looking at you again, Essie. This is my first county budget, and I have learned so much from all of you. I want to share my love and appreciation to my team. They work non-stop on this budget while working on key priorities that my office have set up. So from my Chief of Staff, Tommy, Jose, Sylvia, Katia, where are you? Katia, I love you guys very much, and I look forward to supporting this budget when it comes for a final vote next week. That's it.
There you go. Thank you. Council Member Lutke.
Thank you, Council President Glass, Vice President Friedson, my HHS Chair Albernas, and Public Safety Chair Katz, my colleagues, and a shout out to my fourth floor neighbor, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez and her staff. Our amazing central staff here at the council, and an extra special shout out to our counselors to the council who have not been given thanks yet today. And I want to make sure not everybody appreciates lawyers the way I do, but I do. And my office team, Aaron Kraut, Sarah Wolf, Doug Wallach, and Lindy Hill, for all of the patience, persistence, and incredibly hard work that has been put into navigating this budget process. I said this earlier on in the budget process from up here on the dais, and I'm going to say it again. I understood the assignment, which was to be thoughtful and analytical about the fiscal landscape of the county, the services necessary to the education, health, safety, and economic development of Montgomery County, and balancing the many competing needs with one another to reach an outcome for this next fiscal year that recognizes the county's economic priorities and needs and sets the tone for future restraint, realignment, and reprioritizing county government operations. I also recognize that the current financial landscape is one that the 20th Council, a majority new, inherited and followed the 19th Council's unprecedented need to make decisions in a rapidly altered environment to protect the health and welfare of county residents during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I appreciate that this 20th Council collectively has had to make incredibly difficult choices in order to deal with digging out of that. From my own perspective and priorities, I provide this summary of my inaugural budget experience with the Council. First and foremost, we took care of our thousands of employees who serve our residents. Although this was my first budget for the county, I am not new to government employment, having been one of those government employees at the state who was pulled into many directions during the pandemic under the category of other duties as assigned, and working closely with our education, behavioral health, and public safety partners throughout that time showed me what frontline government employees at the state and local levels had to endure to keep things afloat, adjusting in creative ways, and enduring for sake of the betterment of the community during that critical time. Those teachers, social workers, behavioral health specialists, medical professionals, and public safety professionals, as well as our park and planning professionals and nonprofit providers, kept delivering services, adjusting to meet needs within the restrictions necessitated by the public health emergency. With the investments in our employees in this budget, we've made clear that we appreciate you, we need you, and that you are a valued public servants. Our commitment to that is demonstrated by our initial funding in FY23, continuing forward of a $20,000 recruitment bonus for new police recruits to bring us in line with neighboring jurisdictions, all of whom are struggling to fill vacant law enforcement positions. Retirement plan improvements for all emergency call center staff who have been facing enormous pressure in a significantly understaffed department. And funding sufficient to allow MCPS to fully fund its negotiated agreements with teachers, school support staff, and administrators. The work of valuing our employees does not stop today. Value isn't always a financial one, though it certainly helps. There are operational changes that need to be made, and in some instances, realignment and overhaul of agency operations, improved climate and culture within work environments, and breaking down siloed operations between agencies and individual departments. Our county's government operations need to be collaborative, cooperative, and modern. We also need to do our best to remove barriers to hiring. To that end, I have already taken specific steps and very intentional steps to collaborate with executive branch departments on recruitment issues. My first piece of legislation ended up being co-sponsored by the full council to reform a specific impediment to hiring new county employees related to the collection of medical information, and was done collaboratively with the Office of Human Resources. Director Anderson's leadership and willingness to collaborate when we were both brand new to our roles led to a positive outcome for all. I've also been working with Chief Jones and our labor partners to push the State of Maryland's Police Standards Training Commission, which regulates the certification of new officers, to update and modernize its regulations to match current state law so that we no longer have needless barriers to recruiting individuals who want to dedicate their lives to serving as law enforcement officers. With respect to MCPS, we need to have partnership and trust. And as I previously stated, that trust is now fractured. It was a disservice to our teachers, staff, student advocates, and families who are already concerned about issues within the individual schools and their children attend to stoke anxiety about compensation, as was done in this process. It was disappointing to have conversations with MCPS leaders deep into the budget process in which we found ourselves explaining to them the fiscal reality faced by the county. To rebuild trust and prepare for the upcoming 2023-2024 academic year and the FY25 budget process to follow, it is critically important that the designees of the school system and its elected and appointed leaders come to the council for an open and honest conversation about a common and agreed upon approach. In doing that, I expect candor, a willingness to accept system shortcomings, an eagerness to improve for the future, and a rock-solid commitment to placing our students and their families and the staff who serve them in our individual schools first. Much like with county government operations, I expect MCPS to fully engage in rethinking its operations to the direct benefit of our students, staff, and MCPS families. Another theme of this year's budget was the fiscal sustainability and the course correction which must occur moving forward. Yes, we're making needed and deserved investments in our employees, and we're making additional investments in programs and projects that will benefit our communities. But it's also true that in order to do those things, we're increasing costs for our residents. Significant costs in many cases at a time when so many are facing rising expenses across the board, and additional federally funded relief programs and grants related to the COVID-19 pandemic are ending. We cannot continue down this path, and I will not support continuing down this path. Montgomery County must achieve a much higher degree of fiscal sustainability and revenue growth via economic development, because we cannot tax our way out of low economic growth. The choices we made in this budget reflect only a small amount of the measures we must take to address fiscal sustainability. This is just a starting point. Deeper underlying structural changes must be made to both correct course and prevent us from getting into that situation in the future. It's incredibly hard to say no to individual programs and initiatives, many that are worthy and have potential to make positive impact in someone's life. But we have to be more realistic with the public about what services or programs the county government can actually afford. Unless reevaluation of those programs is done with a lens toward fiscal sustainability with existing resources, we will find ourselves in a position where we have to reduce or eliminate programs and initiatives just to balance our books. I've discussed some of my priorities related to fixing that moving forward, and I know that I'm out of time, so I'm running to the end. But just please know that I am committed over the coming months to continue working with the county executive and my council colleagues, because I know I'm not alone in this sentiment, to pursue legislative and policy fixes to these underlying fiscal management issues. I want to highlight just a couple program or project wins, one being the Youth Harm Reduction Initiative, which will provide $670,000 in additional funding for an impressive group of nonprofits and service providers who know their communities that they serve, working in collaboration with our public safety professionals to provide teenagers in Gaithersburg and Montgomery Village with real options, outlets, and opportunities, developing resiliency, the importance of respect, and attaining the educational opportunities they deserve. I also want to highlight the Violent Crime Information Center funding. Between 2020 and 2022, violent crime increased by 21% in Montgomery County. It has been one of the top issues of concern in my district that gets raised with my office. And while I know this is a broader trend across multiple jurisdictions and across the state as a whole, it's my job to make sure that we do what we can to mitigate and prevent violent crime here. This investment is critical to helping our short-staffed sworn officer complement to identify those who have committed violent crimes and stop future crimes from occurring. Thank you for making sure our major renovation schedules for Damascus and Magruder High Schools have stayed on track. And I want to highlight the leveraging of state funding that we've been able to do for the Bowie Mill Bikeway, which has now been accelerated by 6 months due to the state's funding commitments, and the only police satellite station and community facility this weekend, soon to be named, in memory of Officer Noah Leota. This is a great opportunity and demonstration of how the county can work collaboratively with our state lawmakers and the community, including chambers of commerce like the only chamber, in getting this permanent building built. Finally, and just briefly, I have not forgotten my commitment to making sure that the MCPS bus depot in Shady Grove is relocated in order to fully realize the master plan for that area. There's $250,000 in this FY24 capital budget dedicated specifically to finding sites to relocate the buses. So rest assured that I'm committed to this, as are the residents of Durwood. So my ask for FY25 preview is going to be for funding to execute this plan and carry out the relocation. I am thankful for the opportunity to serve, to collaborate with all my colleagues, and to deliver positive change for Montgomery County. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. I'm going to start with my concerns. I have shared my deep concerns with the funding allocation for MCPS. I want to also share my concerns with the drafting process for this budget. There was a public process, and then there was a private process. The weeks-long public process was robust and transparent, consisting of public hearings, numerous work sessions, and substantive dialogue with the executive branch, stakeholders, and each other. We made many hard decisions as a body to cut tens of millions of dollars in spending. And eventually, we deemed 156 items as high priority new investments. There was then a private process, compressed into 3 days, in which we made further cuts of items that had just been deemed high priority in public to determine this final reconciliation list before us today. In the past, this private process has usually determined amounts less than $10 million. This year, it was hundreds of millions, with very little space for meaningful discussion with colleagues and none of it in public. I do not believe this kind of process will result in the optimal budget for our county, nor an understanding from our constituents as to how we came to these impactful decisions following those public exercises. As Councilmember Albornoz noted, this is a beginning. I think we can and must do better. As has been said, to fund all of those items that we agreed were high priority during the public process would require a 5.7 cent property tax increase. In order to get to the 4.7, we cut new Vision Zero pedestrian safety items, new funding for the Green Bank to accommodate their expanded mission, positions responsible for implementing parts of our climate action plan, increased funding for overflow sheltering for unhoused residents, increased inflation offsets for our nonprofit partners who provide vital services to residents, and more, all of which, again, we had just voted after long public discussions to identify as high priority. I strongly believe, I wish we would have had more opportunity for meaningful collaboration about any changes to that list and in the view of the public. I also concur with the sentiments of Councilmember Balcombe that we missed an opportunity to dive deeper into review of the base budget, and I include myself in that. I wish that if I went back in time, that would have been part of my mission from the start, and I know better moving forward, and I believe that we must all see this as a necessary part of our work moving forward. So clearly I have some frustrations with this budget. I do also want to acknowledge that my colleagues worked extremely hard and in the end supported many important programs that are on the list, especially social safety net programs in the Department of Health and Human Services. I deeply appreciate the thoughtful collaboration with my colleagues on the Public Safety Committee, Chair Katz and Councilmember Ludicky, and my colleagues on the Education and Culture Committee, Chair Jawando, Councilmember Albornoz. I thank my colleagues for their ongoing partnership and dedication to the county and our residents as we wrestled with difficult choices. I thank the hardworking council staff that makes this all possible. And I cannot possibly express the depth of my appreciation and admiration for the staff in my office, Chris, Wes, Anna, Frankie, David, and Carlene. And I too respect the will of this body and that we must pass a budget. And I have thought deeply about where that lands me. And as you have seen, my personal decision is that I cannot support this budget because of how we arrived here and my belief that we are not providing our school system with the resources it needs to succeed. I'm also committed to using my role on the Education and Culture Committee with Chair Jawando and Councilmember Albornoz to help the public and the full council see and understand exactly how MCPS is spending their dollars and why. As I have seen from my own deep dive, which has gotten significantly deeper even in the last couple of weeks, it is an overdue shift that will help us make better budget decisions moving forward. I look forward to the work ahead with colleagues. I know we share goals and values, and I share the belief that next year, together, we will be in an even better position to take on an even tougher budget. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I appreciate everybody's comments. I appreciate their partnership and collaboration and expression of genuine care for our shared community. That's what this budget is about. And as you have heard, the conversation about the next budget begins shortly. And we'll have many more of those conversations. But for now, we are adjourned.